So one more thing that you need to understand is whatever we just discussed here, this is all called as initial context. Okay. So whatever has been prefixed, like especially date, product name, customer's name, right? All these selections that you do here, those are initial context set on the canvas. Okay. So initial context is something which is set. It's a scenario, right? It's a situation or the scenario that you have here. So based upon that, you can see this is the context set, like product name and all. But there is something which is called as a filter context or row context. One is initial context. The second one is filter context or row context. So initial context or evaluation context comes first. So what is initial context or evaluation context? Both are one and the same. So whatever context situation that we have discussed so far, this is called as evaluation context or initial context. So simply it's set up initially, right? We have not done anything. So whatever we are doing, like say I'm changing the product name, we're changing the customer name. So the context has been set by the system, like, within the Power BI desktop. But there's something called as a filter context or a row context. So filter context is nothing but based upon the formula that you have written, the context will come into picture. Just for the example that we already seen that, right? The total sales formula. Here, the total sales is using a function called sum. Sum is an aggregation function. Okay. We'll talk about what are the aggregation functions and what are the iteration functions in a moment. So sum is an aggregation function. So since we are using sum in our DAX formula called total sales, so the sum is triggering a context called as a filter context. Okay. So there is some aggregation happening here. So just already we discussed, right? So first, all these contexts, the initial context will be set up. Initial context, I mean, is whatever we just discussed in the context, right? Concept like date, product name, and customer name. So whatever has been filtered, so that context will be set up. So that is our initial context. Once initial context is set up, the next comes your calculation, which is aggregation function. So I told you, right, the data model is the base before even anything gets calculated. According to this data model, the filter gets executed. And again, the filter gets executed based upon your DAX formula. So here we are writing sum of total revenue. So the sum is nothing but an aggregation function. So aggregation function uses a filter context. That means the reduced data set, whatever you finally see, right? Let's say we're taking this example, right? So we will take some more dates. Let's say what we have applied a product ID filter, we have applied a customer ID filter, and then we are applying a date filter. So now your data table is reduced to such an extent that now your total revenue gets executed. The sum of total revenue, that formula that you have written in your DAX, right? That sum gets executed, and this will be summed up and gives you the output based upon your whatever scorecard. Let's say we are talking about the scorecard, right? The sum gets executed. That means there's a filter context that is applied over there. Okay. And then we have something called row context. Row context gets executed when you use another function called sumx. Okay. Sumx is an iterative function. So we'll talk about that in a while. So depending upon your function that is being applied in your DAX measure, the respective context gets executed. So if you wanted to talk about the row context specifically, I'll try to write a formula which is using this iterative function. I'm going to just write some x. I'm going to use the table name sales, comma. I'm going to multiply this order quantity for the sales table. Multiplied by the unit cost, unit price. So this also gives us the same sales, right? Depending on the quantity sold per unit price. So let me add that measure to this table. Okay. I'll just reduce this sales. Okay, I just change the name so that it decreases the column header width. So as you can see, the value is same. The values are same, right? Only the thing is the formula is different. If you look at this, it is just calculating order quantity multiplied by unit price. That means what? Let's go back into the table. We'll look at this. there is an order quantity, there is a unit price. So what it is doing, it is just multiplying 6 into 1051 and storing in the memory, and then it adds next step. It goes to the next row and says 6 into 750 plus 9 into 3939 plus 8 into. So what it does is it's going each and every row and trying to figure out what is the order quantity and multiply it with unit price. And then order quantity multiplies unit price. So sum x, wherever you use this x, wherever you see this sum x, it is nothing but an iterative function. What it does is it iterates over each row like this. It iterates through each row by row. Okay, that is a main thing that you need to. It goes each row by row, right? Every row it scans through. However big table it is, it goes all the rows and then finally adds up the value in the memory itself. Okay, so sum x, wherever you see x, that is your iterative function. When you use iterative function, the respective engine gets activated, which is iterative engine. So in this scenario, it is creating a context called row context because it is going through each and every row, right? That's why it is called as a row context here. Whereas in the earlier case, what we have seen is it was using aggregation function like sum, right? In that case, what it was generating, it was generating a filter context because it's just summing up, and because there is a filter supply, we call it as a filter context because it is summing up based upon the whatever filter has been applied there. But here, along with the respective filters, there is another thing happening. The calculation is happening based upon row by row. It is going through each row and doing the calculation. So that's why it is called as a row context. Okay.